All right, ladies, Melissa here. How's everyone doing? I want to talk today about workplace trauma. Post-abortive, um, post-abortive trauma disorder is what they call it when you have had trauma in your life. So my trauma in my life was a forced abortion at 16 as a kid, and I want to talk about that and how it affects your work. But before I get into that, I am somebody who tends to deal with stuff. I do. I am someone who's very confrontational. I had someone say to me before, don't run from your problems. And I'm like, I don't. And I don't. I actually go toward the fire. And somebody else had said to me, do you like suffering? I mean, because, you wonder sometimes how much you bring stuff on yourself. And I'm somebody who's a fighter, and I just go at things. I go at a problem over and over and over until it's solved. So that's kind of how I am. So let me see. So just two quick things. I talked to my brother today. Really good conversation. I hadn't talked to him in a while. I admire my brother. Very go-getter type of guy. We do not agree on everything, and there's a lot we disagree with, but he's my brother. It doesn't matter. He's my brother. He's my younger brother. He's always been my little brother to me, and he kind of can say anything he wants to me, and it doesn't really matter to me what he says because he's my brother. With other family, though, like my husband's aunt, who I did confront and say, are you sending me a friend request? Like, question mark, like, why? And then she got back to me and said yes, and then said, what can I do for you? And she's like, oh, I'm just wondering if we're related. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, right. So I'm like, yeah, actually, you're the one who called me a bitch on Facebook. You sent my husband a birthday wish, called his wife a bitch, and I'm that wife. So, it's basically, what do you want? You're also on my son's Facebook. Maybe she forgot. I'll give her a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, but I doubt it. So anyways, basically, I want to talk about trauma at work. So I had done a couple videos yesterday about this crazy situation at work. And then I took it down because I was like, try to think of the other person's perspective. Try to think of how they were feeling. So to take responsibility for yourself is always the first thing you should do. And I believe in that. I believe looking at yourself first. Jesus said, look at the speck in your own eye. No, look at the log in your own eye before you take out the speck in your brother's eye. That's like a little tiny thing. And it's kind of comical because picture yourself walking with this huge log in your eye you wouldn't even be able to see. So Jesus has these really comical sayings that stick with you in life. So situations. I had been working at the Broadmoor and I learned a couple things. Someone told me, I was watching her pour the bottle of wine because that was part of the training that they were doing, and I had just watched her, and I was standing probably, I don't know, maybe a foot away from her, and she said, could you back up, just because I have post-traumatic stress. And she was in the Army, so I don't know what happened to her, but I'm like, yeah, sure. And I backed up like 3 feet away because I don't know her and I don't know what in the world she's been through, but I really appreciated that she communicated with me. So you're gonna have to get through this through communication, and we really do not know the effects of long-term abortions. We can take a 12-week class, we can take another class, but it's something that, you continue to have triggers no matter how much you heal. And we need to recognize that abortion is not something that you just get over. So she was doing that, and I picked that up from her. And so I was already having some things happen over there too. I was like, okay, this woman, this other boss is micromanaging me. She's on me. She's critical. She keeps condemning me. She's like, oh my goodness, did that guy walk out with it without paying for his check? I'm like, did he leave? And she's like, yes, go get him, and I already was on my way to, talk to the man because he had left his hotel number, the room number, and he didn't realize that, we actually had to do another process. So, she was just like that the whole time to me. She was just, I already heard from others, she's just rotten. So I had to speak up to her eventually and say, look, you are making me nervous. And I already asked them at HR to tell her not to associate with me unless there's a good reason. Not that that was honored. So I had to deal with her myself. She was all over me, micromanaging me constantly, which I cannot stand when someone does not give me give me my space. So, so when we look at this, a lot of this can stem from, it's not just abortion, it's kind of the background that you had too. Like, if you've had a lot of condemnation in your life and a lot of criticism, that can be really difficult to take. So I know my mother said once to me, and I wasn't even condemning her, but she's like, I was just like, look, this is my standard and this is the way it is. And she was like, don't be like that to me. I cannot take that. I just can't take it. And she was kind of like that to me growing up. She was like, I tried not to be that way, but she was really critical and condemning. And every time I made a mistake, it was like, you're not allowed to make a mistake. So now take that into work where mistakes are going to happen. You are going to make mistakes. You're not perfect. You're human. And then you have somebody on you, like on you constantly. You're going to have a hard time with that. So for my responsibility in the workplace, I was just like, you're just going to have to communicate more. You're going to have to say something. So in my other workplace, when I was talking about the cleaning company, I was talking about, just the misunderstanding with, me helping myself to, a thing of M&Ms. And then my boss really came down hard on me, really hard. And then he just was like on and on. He's like, you didn't just take M&Ms, but you took lollipops. Lollipops were out in the open, right? So I took some lollipops, mostly for my kids. I'm not even a big candy eater. The M&Ms, yes, I have a weak point for. But they were like these little chocolate, candies and, so that was for my kids. I got in trouble for that. Let's see. I took a Pepsi from the refrigerator because the people at this place that I clean for said, help yourself. Help yourself to anything in the refrigerator. So I got in trouble for that. And that was a lack of communication from one company to another. But then, my boss was just like, well, if you went into a store, you wouldn't take a soda in there, right? You wouldn't take a soda and walk out. You'd pay for it, right? And I'm like, of course I would. Same thing here. You are stealing. I felt totally humiliated, totally embarrassed with being accused of stealing, which I don't have to do that. I can buy my own stuff. I don't have to steal, right? So the leadership and the pressure put on me with also dealing with the trauma. I had just taken a post-abortive class, really was bringing out the stuff in me. He had taken me in the kitchen where there's no cameras. Same thing happened when he reprimanded me. Same thing happened with my mother when I was, when she found out I was pregnant. I didn't even know I was pregnant. She found out. Well, she was in the bathroom and she's like, when was your last period? And I'm like, I have no idea. It's not something we tracked. So when I got out of the bathroom and went in the kitchen, that's where a lot of the trauma happened. It was just like, don't tell me you're pregnant. And I remember just freezing like a deer in headlights and trying to process this new information to me because I wasn't prepared. We didn't talk about, how you get pregnant. We didn't talk about this at all. We didn't talk about anything really. So, besides the normal family gossip, we didn't talk about I didn't talk about money with my family. I think my dad gave a couple lessons. Where do you want to be in 5 years? That was one. Let me see, what was another one? Oh, I said I was marrying for love, not for money. Money does help, he says. So yeah, it does help, but you can't marry for money. Um, what else? Just a couple lessons here and there that I remember sticking out, but it was more live your life and learn as you go. So, yeah, so trauma can happen. And then when I had this person, I felt like take his leadership and, you know, constantly like micromanaging me. I felt that humiliation, like again, I felt it again. I think he thought, okay, we moved on from this. I thought we were all set. I was still processing a lot, and I was like totally embarrassed and humiliated. And a lot of times when you come from that type of background where you do get humiliated for things, it's going to be a struggle for you. So you want to make sure that you are, looking at yourself. Always go to God and say, God, show me, is there any wicked way in me? Did I do something? What did I do? What should, and I remember, when I had my kids, and I did have to go to God a lot. And I had to lean on him a lot. Like, I used to get pretty impatient sometimes. And this was something my mother was like too. She would get impatient and she'd be like, I don't know why I'm impatient. I would get edgy with my kids, just kind of impatient. And, love is patient, love is kind. I do tend to have my boundaries where there's a certain line. I'll take things and then it's just like, okay, I'm not taking stuff anymore. So just know yourself well and be able to know how to deal with things. So most of that came out when I was at the Broadmoor about another woman being on me, being critical. So I had to deal with that on top of working, 40 hours a week. When you are working physically a lot, it's double work because you're also dealing with the trauma. So it can get really intense sometimes because you don't have time to deal with the trauma because you're busy working and it's just coming out. It's just triggering you. It's coming out. So, make sure that you are, in your free time or as much as possible dealing with trauma. I think in the future though, I'm better off now. I'm stronger and I love business. I can be a strong businesswoman when I'm at work. But make sure you take the time to process those triggers, identify them, recognize them, and get look things up and be like, okay, what was this? What just happened here? And continue giving yourself that self-care and you will be okay. But when those triggers happen, like sometimes I would see a woman smoking in her red car, like a red car once I saw this woman flicking a cigarette out the window. That was a trigger for me. And I'm like, why do I feel like I'm having a panic attack? And sometimes I would think I would see my mother from a distance and I would start having a hard time breathing. And those are all parts of the post-abortive stuff. And it affects everything. It affects your marriage. I tend to be very confrontational when it comes to stuff in my marriage. And now healing from that class I just took this year, with the post-abortive class, I'm thinking, okay, I'm a totally different person now. Like, maybe I would have done things a little differently in my marriage. But I have taken responsibility for my actions, which my actions were I came over here to Colorado so my kids would not be homeless. And I can live with that. I can live with those actions. And if you can look at yourself in the mirror and say, geez, just for coming over here and trying to be good to my family, I'm now getting divorced, or for not putting up with my husband neglecting me and laying into him a little bit about this, he's divorcing me. If you can look in the mirror each morning and be like, okay, I can live with myself. You're doing pretty good in life. If you can take responsibility for your own actions, understand how something might look to somebody else because they don't know what in the world is going on with you, and it can look a certain way. And it doesn't mean it is, but you gotta have that communication. And a lot of men can't communicate. They just haven't learned it. They just don't know how. They don't know how to deal with stuff. And in the end, you just need to forgive and move on. And I was telling my brother today when I was talking to him about the divorce, because he didn't really, he hasn't talked to me about the divorce yet. And I was telling him that I just kind of, I'm pretty good at basically bouncing back in life. I don't know why I am like this, but I am. I just bounce back, and, it's just the way I'm made. So don't, even with, I think the gift for me is in the abortion, in the trauma. I have learned to continue moving on and bouncing back, and that has given me a lot of strength as a woman to do a good job with my family, to be able to, raise them up for Christ, have good relationships with all of my sons, even when they, give me grief sometimes. You know, it's still good. It's still good. I'm a strong mother, and I can take, I can take stuff pretty good, and I can give it right back. So I think especially as a mother of boys, you're going to want to be really tough. So that's what I got for you now, everyone. And this is a long video, so I will end this now. But just make sure you give yourself a ton of self-care. It's the biggest thing you need in life. Thanks, guys.